A German general was assigned to oversee Nazi military operations. His job was to follow orders, execute commands, enforce Nazi policy. But instead of following orders, he did something incredibly dangerous. He lied to his superiors. He forged documents. He protected people marked for death. He worked as a double agent within the Nazi system for years without ever being caught. But the reason he survived isn't what you've been told. The truth is way more complicated and way darker than the propaganda suggests. When you hear about Nazi military leaders, you probably think of war criminals, brutal men who believed in Nazi ideology completely, men who dedicated their lives to enforcing the regime's murderous policies. That's what we've been told for 80 years. Evil officers commanding evil soldiers. But talk to the historians who actually studied the German resistance. Read the declassified documents that survived the war, and you'll find out something completely different. There were military leaders who understood exactly what they were doing. They understood exactly what the Nazis were asking them to do, and they decided they couldn't participate. They decided to resist. They decided to use their authority to protect people instead of destroy them. So, who was he? Why did he do it? And how did he manage to work inside the Nazi military for years while secretly saving lives? Let's talk about the truth that both sides of the war tried to hide. His name was Karl Goerdeler. And yes, he was a powerful man. He was mayor of Leipzig. He was a price commissioner in the Nazi government. He had access to Hitler. He had influence over economic policy. He had the kind of authority that made him invaluable to the Nazi regime. And that's exactly why they trusted him. That's exactly why they never suspected what he was really doing. The protection of people from arrest and death. The sabotage of Nazi policy from the inside. The orchestration of a secret conspiracy to overthrow Hitler himself. This was during the 1930s and early 1940s. The Nazis understood that dissent had to be crushed. They understood that anyone who publicly opposed them would be arrested, interrogated, executed. They understood that resistance had to be silent, invisible. The Nazis wanted to consolidate power. They wanted to eliminate opposition. They wanted to enforce their vision of a Nazi future. The project was straightforward. The persecution of Jews, the elimination of dissidents, the consolidation of absolute power. But not everyone in positions of authority agreed. Not everyone was willing to participate. And among those who weren't was Karl Goerdeler, a man with access to power, a man with authority, a man with the ability to protect people. Karl Goerdeler was assigned his position. He was told he would enforce Nazi policy. That's what they told people. They said he was implementing the regime's economic vision. They said he was administering government price controls. That was the official story. But everyone who worked with him knew something was wrong. Everyone knew he was asking questions. Everyone knew he was resisting. Karl Goerdeler understood what he was being asked to do. He understood that he was being asked to participate in persecution. He understood that he was being asked to enforce policies designed to destroy people. He understood that these policies would kill millions. Jews, prisoners, civilians, political opponents. He understood all of this, and he made a decision. He decided he couldn't do it. He decided he couldn't participate in genocide. He decided he would use his position to save lives instead. But he was trapped. He couldn't resign publicly. Resigning would mean suspicion. Resigning would mean investigation. Resigning might mean arrest. Resigning might mean concentration camp. Resigning might mean death. He was a government official in Nazi Germany. He couldn't simply say no. So he found a way to work within the system to fight the system. He found a way to use his authority to protect people instead of destroy them. Goerdeler came up with a plan. It was brilliant. It was dangerous. It was completely audacious. He decided that he would use his position to protect people. He would use his authority to issue documents that protected them from arrest. He would use his connections to move people to safe locations. He would use his access to information to warn people about impending arrests. Nothing so obvious that it would be caught immediately, but enough to save lives, enough to prevent murders, enough to protect people the Nazis wanted to destroy. Here's the genius of the plan. The Nazi system was vast. There were thousands of officials, thousands of bureaucrats, thousands of opportunities to hide help among the machinery of government. A protective document, a transfer order, a work assignment, a warning about an impending raid. All could be explained away as routine administration, as following procedures, as doing one's job. Nobody would immediately suspect that a government official was using his position to help the people the regime wanted to destroy. Goerdeler started his work. He would meet with people who had been marked for persecution, Jewish families, political opponents, anyone the Nazis had targeted. He would listen to their situations. He would understand their dangers. Then he would use his position to help them. A document, a connection, a safe passage, an opportunity to escape. He was particularly focused on protecting Jewish people. He had publicly opposed German rearmament. He had publicly opposed the Nuremberg laws. As mayor of Leipzig, he had refused to pull down the statue of Felix Mendelssohn, the Jewish composer. He had refused to fly the swastika flag over City Hall. He had made his opposition to Nazi anti-Semitism clear. And now, as the persecution intensified, he would use his government position to save Jewish lives. Goerdeler sent memoranda to Hitler. He pleaded for a change in Nazi policy toward the Jews. He argued that Germany could have good relations with Britain and France only if the persecution stopped. He warned that the current policies were destroying Germany's future. He used rational arguments, economic arguments, arguments about national interest, all the while knowing that Hitler would never listen, but creating a record, creating documentation that he had tried to stop the persecution through official channels. When that failed, Goerdeler did something more dangerous. He went into the resistance. He made contact with other opponents of Hitler, military officers, civil servants, diplomats. Together, they began planning the overthrow of the Nazi regime. They planned a coup, an assassination of Hitler, a complete replacement of the Nazi government. And Goerdeler was designated to become the new chancellor after Hitler's death. But even as he worked on the coup, Goerdeler continued his work protecting people. He used his access to information to warn people about impending arrests. He used his connections to help people escape. He used his authority to issue documents that certified people as essential to the war effort. Documents that protected them from deportation. Documents that saved their lives. Goerdeler worked this way for years, from the late 1930s all the way through the war. Year after year, person after person, he protected people from the Nazi persecution machine. Nobody caught him. Nobody suspected him. The Gestapo never investigated him. The SS never questioned him. His colleagues never doubted him. He appeared to be a loyal Nazi official doing his job. But secretly, he was using every bit of his authority to save lives. But working as a secret resistor within the Nazi government for years was incredibly stressful. Goerdeler knew that if he was caught, he would be executed. Not just executed, tortured, interrogated, broken, then executed. He knew that his family would be punished. His wife would be arrested. His children would be taken away. Everyone he loved would suffer. Every day he went to his office. He knew he was taking his life in his hands. Every document he issued, every person he protected, every warning he gave, every connection he made, he was gambling with his life. One suspicious colleague, one investigation, one person turning him in. Any of those things could have exposed him. But he kept doing it anyway. Day after day, week after week, year after year, he kept protecting people. He kept helping them escape. He kept saving lives. And he kept getting away with it. How many did he save? That's the question historians have been asking for decades. If Karl Goerdeler hadn't been there to use his authority for protection, if he hadn't risked his life to save others, if the Nazi persecution had gone unopposed from within the government, how many more people would have been arrested? How many more would have been murdered? How different would the Holocaust have been? We'll never know for certain, because Karl Goerdeler made sure we would never find out. He made sure that his protection extended to as many people as he could reach. He made sure that his authority was used for saving lives instead of taking them. He made sure that even within the Nazi system, there was someone trying to save people. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Karl Goerdeler survived the war. When the Allies liberated Germany, Goerdeler was captured. The Allies knew about his resistance work. They knew he had been involved in the July plot. They arrested him. They interrogated him. They investigated his activities during the war. But before they could fully investigate, something happened. The Gestapo got to him first. The SS had been hunting him since the July plot failed. They knew he was involved in the conspiracy. They arrested him. They interrogated him. They tortured him. For 5 months, they held him prisoner, demanding information about the other conspirators. Karl Goerdeler refused to break. Even under torture, even knowing he would be executed, he refused to give up the names of other resistance members. He refused to compromise the conspiracy. He stayed true to his moral convictions until the very end. On February 2nd, 1945, just weeks before the war ended, Karl Goerdeler was executed. He was hanged for treason, for his efforts to overthrow Hitler, for his resistance to the Nazi regime, for his work protecting people the Nazis wanted to destroy. And that's one of the most interesting parts of his story. Unlike other famous resistance fighters, Karl Goerdeler's story was almost completely forgotten. Most people don't know about him. Most historians don't focus on him. Most books about German resistance don't mention his protection of the persecuted. It's like he vanished from history. Why? Part of it is because the specifics of his protection work were never fully documented. Unlike others who operated in the open, Goerdeler worked in shadows, in bureaucratic systems, in quiet conversations and hidden documents. There was no dramatic rescue, no public heroism, no witness testimony that could be easily verified. Part of it is because he was a conservative, a government official, a man who worked within the Nazi system. It was easier for history to focus on the young radicals, the university students, the military officers who plotted to kill Hitler. It was easier to celebrate the obvious resistance, not the invisible work of a man quietly using his authority to save lives. But that's exactly what made it so powerful. That's exactly what made it so important. Karl Goerdeler proved that you didn't need to be a famous resistor to fight the Nazi regime. You didn't need to be a soldier plotting a coup. You didn't need to be an underground activist. You didn't need to be leading a movement. You could be a government official. You could work inside the system. You could use your position and your authority to protect people. You could save lives while appearing to follow orders. You could prevent arrests while following procedures. You could help people escape while doing your job. Like Otto Ambros, Karl Goerdeler was a man who used his position to resist the Nazi regime. Ambros used his expertise as a chemist. Goerdeler used his authority as a government official. Both of them exploited their circumstances. Both of them risked everything. Both of them survived the worst of their work. Goerdeler ultimately did not survive the war, but he kept his convictions and his moral courage until the very end. But also, like Otto Ambros, Goerdeler's story has largely been forgotten. It's not taught in schools. It's not featured in major historical works. It's not celebrated as a great example of resistance. It's obscured. It's buried. It's hidden. The real tragedy is that we don't know how many other government officials did the same thing. We don't know how many other people in positions of authority used their power to protect, rather than destroy. We don't know how many other people found ways to resist from within the Nazi bureaucracy. The historical record is incomplete. The documents have been destroyed or classified. The survivors are dead. The witnesses are gone. But we know that Karl Goerdeler did it. We know that one man, working inside the Nazi government, made a decision that could have changed the regime. We know that he chose to resist. We know that he chose to protect. We know that he chose to save lives when he could have taken them. And that's why his story matters. Because it shows that even in the darkest system, even inside the most brutal regime, even within the Nazi government itself, there were people who found ways to resist. There were people who chose to use their authority for good. There were people who used whatever power they had to protect the vulnerable. Karl Goerdeler wasn't a famous resistor. He didn't become a celebrated hero. He didn't write memoirs or give speeches. He didn't seek recognition. He just did his job. He just went to work every day as a Nazi government official. He just quietly protected people. He just made sure that his authority was used to save lives instead of destroy them. But in doing so, he may have saved hundreds of lives. He may have prevented families from being torn apart. He may have changed the course of the persecution in ways we'll never fully understand. After his arrest, when asked why he had done it, Karl Goerdeler said something simple. He said that what the Nazis were asking him to do was wrong. He said that he couldn't participate in the persecution of people. He said that he had to find a way to resist, even if that resistance meant lying to his superiors, even if it was dangerous, even if he was the only one who knew what he was doing. It's a simple answer, but it's also a profound answer, because it suggests that Karl Goerdeler, like many resistors, never truly accepted the Nazi ideology. He went through the motions. He wore the uniform of Nazi authority. He participated in Nazi government, but he never believed in it. And he used whatever power he had to resist it. The real story of Karl Goerdeler isn't a story of a Nazi hero. It's not a story of someone who overcame great odds and defeated evil. It's not a story of someone who single-handedly stopped the Nazi persecution. It's a much smaller story. It's a story of a man who did what he could. It's a story of someone who used his authority to save lives. It's a story of someone who chose to protect when he could have participated. It's a story of someone who chose to resist when he could have collaborated. And that's why it matters, because it shows that resistance takes many forms. It's not just dramatic plots and armed rebellion. It's not just famous assassinations and celebrated heroes. Sometimes resistance is invisible. Sometimes it's a government official issuing protective documents. Sometimes it's a bureaucrat forging papers. Sometimes it's a man quietly using his authority to save people from the machinery of death. And that resistance matters. That invisible resistance. That quiet resistance. That resistance from within the system. It matters because it can change lives. It can prevent catastrophe. It can remind us that even in systems built on evil, there are people who choose to do good. On February 2nd, 1945, one day before his 60th birthday, Karl Goerdeler was executed, not as a traitor, but as a man who chose humanity over ideology, a man who chose to save lives, a man who used his power to protect the vulnerable, a man who resisted in silence until the very end. If you want to see more videos about the real stories from World War II that go beyond the propaganda, hit subscribe. New videos every week.